Hey everybody, it is Nathan Selove with another edition of Autism Actually Speaking. Last week, I suffered a family tragedy, and I would rather not talk about the specifics of it right now. However, it is very relevant to the subject of today's video. Depression. So some of you might have noticed over the last several months that the quality of some of my videos has not been as good. I've been doing more cell phone videos, and the quality of my videos has definitely been reflected in the growth of my channel. And a huge reason for that is that for the past several months, I've been feeling a lot of depression and a overall lack of motivation. And a huge part of that, I would say, is stress from work. It's like I work really hard during the days when I have work, and then days when I don't have work, it's just like I don't have any motivation to do anything. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do anything productive. Now, I know that depression affects a lot of people. To some people, it's to a clinical degree. To some people, it's seasonal. To some people, it might come and go. And I know that it's not just an autism issue. However, I do believe that there are some ways in which autistics might be uniquely impacted by depression. Now, it's possible some of the things I talk about in this video might be relatively universal, but it is primarily going to be based on my own experience and my own knowledge. So I want to talk about what depression is, ways in which it can impact autistics uniquely, and also some ways in which we can try to cope with it and deal with it. So first off, let's talk about what depression is. And to discuss this, I want to discuss where it came from. So I've talked about my dad a lot on this YouTube channel, and I've even had him in several videos. So many of you are probably familiar with him, but for those of you that aren't, he's a professor of anatomy and physiology. And what he has told me is that it's actually been theorized that depression is an evolutionary leftover from an early part of human development in which we were hibernating animals. Basically, the physiological characteristics that cause a bear to hibernate are very similar to the physiological characteristics that cause a human to feel depressed. Now, if this is true, this would explain quite a few things. Why people sometimes eat a lot when they're depressed, why it's often seasonal, and also why we don't feel a motivation to do anything. I mean, our body is literally telling us that we shouldn't be doing anything. And that knowledge is actually really helpful for me, because when you really think about it, depression leads people to have feelings of worthlessness or uselessness or like nothing matters. There's no specific reason to believe that I'm useless, meaningless, or that nothing I do matters. It's just an evolutionary leftover. It's a chemical imbalance or balance or however you would frame it. So let's talk about ways in which it can affect autistics specifically. Now again, some of these ways might be universally applicable, but they are based in my experience. So autistics do tend to feel more anxiety than other people. And having a lot of anxiety often feels like there's a boom-bust cycle in my brain where I'm super anxious about something, and as soon as I've overcome that, or if I haven't overcome it yet, then I just feel depressed. Like if I have a huge project that I need to grade and I haven't done it yet, all the time that I'm spending not doing it, I'm feeling really depressed. And even often when I finish it, I still feel depressed because it often feels like just the calm before the next storm. I also set very high standards for myself, and sometimes if I don't complete them, or if I even fall short by just a little bit, I spend the next day beating myself up about it. And that's really not a healthy thing to do. And I've talked to many autistics that have very similar experiences. Another way in which I think that autistics can sometimes be more affected by depression is isolation. Because autistics often struggle to communicate with neurotypicals, being autistic can often feel very isolating. And not having people there for you, people to talk to, people to take care of you emotionally, can often lead to more depression. Now, during this pandemic, I've been very fortunate in that I do have my wife. I do live with my wife, and we've been trying to take care of each other emotionally during this really rough time. But even with one other person, it can still feel relatively isolating, especially for those of us on the spectrum that are more extroverted. I know that I've talked about this in the past, how a lot of autistics are introverted, but not all of them. And those of us who are extroverted can feel very depressed with a lack of human contact. And that lack of human contact and the subsequent depression that leads from it can be exacerbated by autism. So what are some ways in which we can try to cope with depression? Well, the first way I would say is one of the most effective, but it's also the most difficult. And that's just to try to be active. Exercise, go on a run, go somewhere, or just do something. One of the things that Jess and I have tried to do during this pandemic a few times is to go to our local arboretum. It's outside, so it's easy to socially distance, and it's a really beautiful location. I've also been trying to get back into the habit of exercising at least once a week. Now, I would say that this is the most effective way of coping with depression, but the reason why it's the most difficult is because depression is the very reason why we don't want to do any of this stuff. When I'm feeling really depressed and when I'm feeling an overall lack of motivation, I don't want to exercise. The only time I really can is when I pretty much force myself to. And that can be really difficult to sustain. In the end, I would say it yields the most positive results, but it's definitely the hardest to achieve. Another suggestion that I would make to autistics is to try to maintain some type of routine. In some ways, this can actually go along with the first one. For example, I do my YouTube channel and I do my podcast every week, and I do one episode of each subsequent platform every week. Now, when I finish a video or an episode of the podcast, I feel fulfilled and I don't feel as depressed. And because it's a part of my routine, it's easy to force myself to do it. So what I would suggest is find some type of activity that you find fulfillment in and schedule a specific time every week in which you do that activity. And just have that be a part of your routine. In my experience, that has gone a long way to helping out with depression. And the last thing is to remember that you're not alone. I know that depression is one of those things that, for some people it's clinical, for some people it's seasonal, for some people it comes and goes, but for everybody, it's physiological. And it can be really hard to fight off a physiological response. However, remember that you're not alone. There are other people that experience depression, but there are also other people there that care about you. I mean, that feeling of worthlessness that comes from depression can often be offset, at least for me, when I do remember all of the people that I care about and all of the people that care about me. And when I remember that I have a community of fellow autistics within this channel and even outside of this channel that are all working towards a mutual goal of trying to help each other, trying to aid each other, trying to be there for each other. So with that in mind, I would encourage people in this video that are watching this video to leave a comment down below and talk about ways in which you cope with depression. As always, I really love how this community helps each other out. And I've really appreciated the feedback that I've received on this channel over the last several years. It really has helped me, and I hope that this channel has been a resource that has helped you. Well, that's today's video. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a like, a share, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Check out some of my other stuff, and I'm on Twitter now, so you can follow me, @NathanSelove. And if you want to support the channel in other ways, support me on Patreon. In the meantime, if you have any questions or topics you'd like addressed, please leave them in the comments below, or message me on my Facebook, also linked below. And remember, if you have ever had a heated argument about pasta, you might be autistic.